My name is Dr. Hank Spencer. I give technical support to our nutritional consultant in the Midwest, primarily in Wisconsin. Been with Cargill for 3 years and enjoyed my time there. And I appreciate you all taking some time out of your busy day because there's just a ton of things to see here at Expo. But hopefully, by the time I get done, I can at least give you a couple ideas or some things to think about as you go back to your dairies or work with your clients. So we're going to talk about component production as you heard up to par. And there's really, it's such a broad topic that I can take one little small minute thing and talk for the 40 minutes that I'm allotted. But we're going to kind of distill it and kind of keep it high level. Again, just to try to give you some ideas. The areas that we're going to address is number one, why does it matter? Number two, what is possible? Because we hear a lot out there. We got a 6-pound club. I'm hearing 7 pounds. I even saw some stuff talking about 8 pounds of components. What should you expect? And then finally, how do you get there? What are some of the levers that you have to pull to try to get to the component levels that you want to be involved in? So the first thing, why does it matter? Because it makes up a big part of our milk check. You know, in our class 3 markets that we have up here in Wisconsin, you know, we look at the first 6 months of the year. Our prices were pretty tough up here, just like it was across the United States. So when we look at the milk price that we have on up here, in January, we were at $13.96. This particular herd, we were making another $2.46 on our basis, which gave us a gross milk price of $16.42. That allowed us to be at just about break even. And that was coming from the components, even though our components weren't necessarily paying the best. We were doing well with our butterfat at $2.50, but our protein pay price was only $1.19 at that time. The next month it was $1.16. It finally started to creep on up and has continued to climb. You know, I think today we're at like about $2.45 on protein price. And so when we look at this herd, and again, this is just a very average, typical dairy herd. They milk about 13.50, you know, into the tank. This herd was averages about 80 to 85 pounds. You know, it's pretty consistent. But we look at what our components and the pounds of fat and the pounds of protein that we're shipping off the dairy. You know, it becomes very, very critical because what happens when milk falls? You know, we drop down to 79 pounds. Dairy producers, hey, kick it in gear, guys. You know, we got to kick it on up. And so we kicked it in gear. We got up to 84, 87, 87. But if I look at the pounds of fat that I was shipping off the dairy, I actually went the other way. You know, and so there's a balance here as well as an efficiency here that we constantly got to be looking at. And so when I look at my energy-corrected milk feed efficiency, you can see during this time, you know, I continue to drop down. But more importantly, let's look at our component efficiency. Am I turning these cows as efficiently as I possibly can to make the maximum economic impact for my dairy producer? What happened here? When we dropped down to milk, we started pushing the cows. I started following my protein fat inversions, and I absolutely kicked them back up. Up here, we said, you know what? We're not making the money off the extra ingredients that we're adding in. You know, we readjusted and we got our cow health and our cows back to a normal rumen function. And so you got levers, but you got to realize that anytime you pull a lever, you can have negative or positive consequences. And so you have to continually monitor to watch where we're at. In addition, you know, there's all sorts of ingredients. If you guys have been walking around the exhibit area, you know, add this, we'll get more protein. Add this, we'll get more fat. Add this, we'll get more of this. It has to make economical sense. You know, when we're working with the dairies, it's critical that it makes economical sense. We look at the first quarter of 2019 with a $1.19 protein price for January, $1.18 for February, $1.63 for March. That was an average pay price of $1.33. On a 90-pound herd, or 90-pound herd milking 1,000 cows, if I push in some protected methionine at 22 cents a cow a day, I net out losing that producer 10 cents a cow a day, $100 a day, or $3,000 a month. You know, you need to constantly evaluate, should these products be in, should these products be out? Because these products are good products. They do what they say they're going to do, but is it cost effective? Now I look at it today, or with July's milk price, the same 22 cents. I'm going to gain a tenth if I put it on in. Now I'm at a break even. Would I do that? Yes. Because what we got projections as we move forward that our protein price is going to continue to rise. And I want to capture it all. I'm greedy that way. But I just don't want to cost my producers money at the same time. So what is possible? Cargill has an internship program. We're very fortunate 2 years ago to have a University of Wisconsin senior student with us, Connor Williams. And his project goal was simply to collect diet and management information from high-producing herds. You know, by that, we classified them as those herds that are producing more than 6 pounds of components. And they had to be doing that for a year. It wasn't just a one-time thing. These were consistently high-producing herds that were performing well. We also were trying to determine the physical effect of NDF within the diets on these high-producing herds to see where our range was and what our scatter was. We had 21 herds in Wisconsin. The herd size ranged from 56 cows on up to 1,656 cows. I want to show you some of this information. It's important to remember that this is not science, okay? This is simply observational data. And a lot of times we like to confuse observational data with science, but I want you to truly understand that this is just observation data. We were trying to figure out, are there things within these herds that are doing that can keep them consistently at 6, 6.5, or 7 pounds of components? The way these graphs are set on up is we have the average for the herd, the average of 7 pounds plus of components there in green or with the diamonds. We then looked at the 6.5 to 7 that are in purple with the squares, and then in blue, those below 6.5, they're in the triangles. And so you see, when we're just looking at herd size here, we had a variance of herd sizes across the board, but basically, you know, on average, the groups were running fairly consistent. If we look at the production on these herds, when we're looking at component efficiency, the first thing we got to understand in that equation is what is our dry matter intake. And you can see there's a variance of dry matter intake. Basically, the dry matter intake in these herds, we're running about 60 pounds of dry matter. It ranged from 58 to 62. And as expected, those herds that were producing more had a little bit higher dry matter intake. But when we look at this range, you know, this band that comes across here, you can see we got outliers. You know, we had a herd here that was over 7 pounds of components, but was also eating over 70 pounds of dry matter. Those are things that we start to look at and say, is there opportunity within the herd? Can I make these same pounds of components, but can I do it much, much more efficiently? When we look at our milk pounds per cow, our milk pounds per cow, our energy corrected pounds per cow, it's a pretty straight linear line. You know, as we move things up and move things down, the 7+ pound component herds are higher than the 6.5 pound component herds. However, when we start to look at the production, you know, the production does not necessarily coincide with the pounds of components. When I look here, you know, I got green dots up here with high feed efficiencies, and I've got, you know, green dots all the way down here. Again, that's that herd is eating 70 pounds of dry matter. And so they're all over the range, and that's what I'm saying. As you're working with your producers or you're working on your dairy, is there a way to make things more efficient so you can get the best return on investment from those cows? We look, our average feed efficiency was at 1.62. It ranged from 1.56 to 1.70. If we did the feed efficiency by energy corrected milk, we averaged about 1.69. You know, the range again was from 1.62 to 1.779. And so there is quite a large range within that. Energy corrected feed efficiency tends to follow the same trend, okay? Again, its feed efficiency is the energy corrected milk divided by the pounds of dry matter being consumed. But the number we're starting to focus on, after this work came out, we started focusing on really hard was what is our component efficiency? How does that match up to our feed efficiency? And where should we be sitting on our component efficiency numbers? What we found is we had an average of 11.4 across these well-performing herds. All these herds were very, very good herds. But we can see again, the vast majority should be over 11. That to me is kind of where I'm sitting at on table stakes. Yes, I got herds up there at 13.7, 12.75. That's tough. So what is a realistic goal? And I think being above 11 is a very, very realistic goal of component efficiency. Again, I pointed these two herds out. That was a 70 pound, eating 70 pounds of dry matter. This herd was eating 69 pounds of dry matter. And so I'm making a lot of components, but I'm not doing it very efficiently. And so that means I'm leaving money on the table that I need to capture in today's dairy market. Component efficiency calculation is simply the pounds of milk times the fat percent to get the total pounds of fat, the pounds of milk times the protein percent to get the total pounds of protein, sum those two on up to get the pounds of components, then it's pounds of components divided by the dry matter intake times 100 is our component efficiency. Again, very, very similar calculation to what we do when we're doing feed efficiency or energy-corrected milk. But it's another number to look at when you're monitoring your dairy. Like any monitoring program, I wish there was one perfect number. There's not. There just is not. You need to look at your component efficiencies. You need to look at your feed efficiencies. You need to look at your energy-corrected milk. You need to look at your milk check to make sure that we're making enough money there. When we looked at butterfat, this one I found quite interesting because, I've been around the industry for a long time and we see these things change. At one time, 3.5% butterfat, hey, that's good. That's all I need. Of course, at that time, the legal limit for somatic cell count was 1.2 million, and so, things have changed quite a bit. But I look at these, there is not a lot of difference. The average was 3.89. The average of the 7 plus was 3.89. The 6.5 to 7 was 3.93. And less than the 6.5 was 3.92. Again, if you look at the scatter graph, you can see those, they're pretty solid. And it's not really about the average. To me, what's important is how many of these are below 3.8? I'll show you the information in a minute that I'm going 3.8 again is kind of table stakes. We should be at 3.8. Today's Holstein with all the genetics and all the breeding and all the work that's been put into them are capable of making that sort of protein, or butterfat, excuse me. Same thing with our protein. None of them are below 3. We had some in the 3.3s, but the average was 3.15. Only about half these herds were using a protected methionine source. Some of them were just doing it through solid nutrition. So again, I feel pretty strongly that I expect to get at least a minimum of 3.00 protein. And if the price dictates it, I know I can get another 10th if it's economically feasible. The real kind of takeaway to me when I was looking at this, at that slide, and I look at the pounds of components per day, you can't forget about milk production because milk production is going to drive it. When I say that, if I want to have 7 pounds of components, I got to be a 100-pound herd at a 3.9 and a 3.1. That's going to give me 7 pounds of components. If I increase my components from a 3.9 to a 4.0, for fat, and I go up 0.05 on protein from a 3.1 to 3.15, or I go the other way, just up and down a tenth on fat or 0.05 on protein, I've got to get 2 more pounds of milk. If I'm going to drop, I can have 2 less pounds of milk if I'm going to rise. And that 2-pound rule holds pretty true all the way through. Then the question is what's real? What's real for your herd of cows? A 4.3 and a 3.3, those are pretty tough numbers. I'm going to have to drive some milk. On the same token, if I'm going to be floating around there in that 3.7 and that 3.0, I better be at 104 pounds of milk. Doing the math again, at a 6.5 pound drive, it's the same thing. It's 2 pounds of milk up or down. If I'm going to go up a tenth of a pound in fat, or tenth of a percent in fat, and 0.05 in protein. And so what's realistic for your herd? One of the first places to be looking is these fat protein inversions in these herds. And don't look at averages are good. It gives us a place to look, but you have to be careful of where you're looking. On an average, I like to bird hunt, and half the time I shoot in front of the bird and half the time I'm behind the bird. On average, I never miss, so, we got to kind of balance things on out. What we started doing is we start breaking these down by 30-day groups. And so we're looking from 0 to 15, 15 to 45, 46 to 75, et cetera, on up. And do I have a group of cows that are not performing the way that I expect them to perform on butterfat and protein? Well, we see these 7 pounds of component herds are not bad. They're running pretty much in that their average was 13.4, but right around that 10%, which is kind of the goal that we set, is I don't want more than 10% butterfat and protein inversions. But they're flat all the way across the board. When I look at 6.5 to 7 pounds, I've got a tremendous opportunity there. I am flipping these cows, and these high producing cows that are really pounding on the feed. Do I have enough, physical effective NDF to slow these cows down? This is a place I can win on efficiency. The other place I win, that pattern right there is the pattern I see on HBS herds. I'm turning that rumen so fast, I got an inversions in my butterfat and proteins, and then the next thing I know, I tend to start popping with the HBSs. Again, our less than 6.5, they were doing pretty good, but they're a little bit higher in the tail end groups of cows. So Harventine did a ton of work on over 200,000 DHA test day data from Pennsylvania, Minnesota, Texas, and Florida. And he did this up from 210 to 216 and said, what is possible? Well, the average is 3.75. What I found really interesting is that 31% of them were less than 3.6 and 11.6 were less than 3.4. I throw these bottom feeders on out, I'm going to be well over 3.8. Again, is your herd performing to that level? The potential's there, and I challenge you that we can get there. So to get there, one of the things we got to understand is simple milk fat production. We know that there's two sources of milk fat. We got the preform and we got the de novo. The preform come from the diet. They're mobilized from adipose tissue. The de novo, what's made in the udder, comes from our volatile fatty acid precursors, our acetate and butyrate. Major fatty acids of milk fat, they know that approximately 25% of them are going to be de novo, 40% of them are going to be mixed, and 35% are preformed. These 35% that are preformed are coming right through from the diet. They tend to be our C18s and above, where our mixed tend to be our C16s, and then our de novo is classified as C14 or less. So what you should expect? We'll test it. The Minor Institute out in New York has done a ton of really good research out there on the de novos, and some of the creameries out there are testing the milk fat on every single load. I think St. Albans is one that is doing that out of Vermont. And what they've been able to set on up is guidelines. If we're going to be sitting there at a 3.8 butterfat, I need at least 0.85% to be de novo. I'm going to need greater than 1.3 being mixed and greater than 1.3 being preformed. It's a really good test. At least starts to clue you in that if I'm not where I want to be, where may I have a breakdown? As the Minor Institute has looked at this, more in depth, what they found is, okay, if I'm over a 0.85 and I'm over a 3.8 butterfat, I'm doing good. My rumen's functioning properly. Just keep it up, keep going the way you're going. On the same token, if I'm less than a 3.8 and I'm less than a 0.85 on my de novos, am I feeding too much fat or too much starch? Or do I have too little PENDF? Or is there management effects that are affecting cow behavior? So all of these are things that we start to investigate. If I'm less than the 0.8, but I'm over 3.8, then do I have problems with rumen function? Is it an overstocking issue? Am I feeding lots of inert fat? Because I can buy my butter fat too. If I feed a bunch of C16s, or my mixed, I can force my butter fat up. But again, it becomes an economical decision. Does that make sense or not? And here, when I'm over the 0.85, but I'm less than the 3.8, there's an opportunity there to feed fat. When I see those, I'm going, all right, guys, we should take a look at feeding some fat. Do I have thin cows? Do I have problems in my cows coming through around the corner because they can't mobilize that fat? So how do we get there? We'll start with management. One of the simple things, and I touched on that a minute ago, is just a breeder genetics. If I want more butter fat, I can crossbreed all my cows, or milk jerseys. They will give us more butter fat. I think that, though, in today's world, with the advances they're making in genomics and that information there, I think that we're going to get there through genomics with our Holstein breed. I truly believe that with the work that's being done. And so we want to keep a close eye on what's going on there because I think there's going to be a lot more opportunity as we move forward. The second one is the ration presentation. Everyone talks about the 5 different rations a cow eats every single day. The one that's on paper, the one that got mixed, the one that got dropped, the one the cow consumed, and then the one the cow digested. And so we got 5 different rations, and our goal there is to put them all as close to possible or be similar as possible. So the mixing, the sorting, the feeding frequency, the processing, I think Diamond V has done a wonderful job, in the last 10 years of exposing some of the places that we were maybe not cognizant or aware of that has a tremendous impact on our cows and our cows' health. The second one is heat abatement and seasonality. And this one's a little bit puzzling to me. Again, this work was done by Harvington, I believe. I forgot to footnote it, I apologize. And what he did looking at these herds, he said, okay, you know what? We lose butter fat every June, July, and August, and it starts to come back in the fall. So some people take that as a seasonality effect. I'm not certain that is a cause and effect versus an association. It is harder in the summer to make butter fat. Dry matter intake is dropping, maintaining rumen health becomes more difficult. But I know that we find that we get most people drowned, when at the same time the ice cream sales go up. So I'm not going to say drowning is related to ice cream. I'm going to say more people in the water in the summer when more people eat ice cream. And so I think we need to sort this out yet a little bit. Is it a true seasonality effect? Or is it a heat abatement effect? Or is it things that we're doing with the diets? But I think that's something that is real. But the thing I tell my producers, it cannot be an excuse. This is a 5,000 cow herd in Wisconsin. Classic seasonality effect in 2018. Well, we got our butt chewed, right about here. And we said, we're not going to let that happen again. And we're going to maintain milk. This is 2019. Same herd, same management, same feed stuff, same nutritional work. We did some things a little bit different, but all of a sudden, I'm not having a seasonal effect. Pardon? Yeah. We're within 1 pound, all the way through, So again, people work to your expectations. If you expect butterfat to fall during summer, pretty sure it will. So set your expectations. Stocking density. Again, remember I said this is observational data, that I'm showing you. This is not science. But this is one of the things that came out of this work that I think is fair to show. So when I look at the stocking density, we averaged 119.2% stocking density, and that's cows per bed. That's cows per bed. The average on a 7+ pound herd was 134%. The 6.5 to 7 was 116%, and below 6.5 was 108%. Directly an inverse relationship. But again, we have great science that shows that as we increase our stocking density, it can have a negative impact on cows. We know if cows do not get at least 10 hours of lying down time, it's going to have a negative impact on cows. All this data tells me is there's management things that we can do to mitigate some of the negative consequences of crowding. Are you willing to bed twice a week versus every 2 weeks? Are you willing to push feed on up every 2 hours? Are you willing to make sure your cows are not spending more than 40 minutes in the holding pen? You know, are you delivering feed twice a day versus once a day? And so those are the management things that can help minimize some of the negative effects that have been proven through very good science that we have when we overstock our cows. So maintaining rumen function to me is the key. You know, it's the underpinning of this whole thing. If I'm going to maintain good solid components. And really what I'm trying to do by maintaining my rumen function is simply feed the pig behind the rumen. A rumen's the ultimate recycler. Once I get past the rumen, we're just a monogastric. You know, so I'm trying to feed that pig behind the rumen, and what I'm feeding it is basically the bacteria that I'm growing in that rumen. They wash on out. That bacteria has 62% crude protein, it's 21% carbohydrates, it's 12% fat, and it's 4.4% ash. It is really good feed. You know, we'd pay a lot for that if that was in a bag or in a bin. Also, when I look at the essential amino acid profile of milk and focusing on histidine, lysine, and methionine, you know, our histidine number in milk averages about 5.8, lysine 16.1, and methionine 6.7. When I look at microbial proteins, amino acid profile, shouldn't be any surprise that histidine's at 4.2 versus 5.8, 16.6 versus 16.1, and 6.0 versus 6.7. It's almost a perfect amino acid blend for milk. You know, so our cow is making that for us. We have to capitalize on it. If I compare other feedstuffs, you know, corn, soybean meal, blood meal, yeah, I'm using all those, but all of them are going to be deficient somewhere down the road. You know, yes, I get a real high level of histidine and a real high level of lysine, but I'm real low on methionine out of blood. You know, corn and soybean meal each have their pluses and each have their minuses. But again, when we're looking at balancing our amino acids to match up, it really starts with how much of this microbial protein can I get? So when I'm maintaining rumen function, the first thing I'm going to focus on is what's doing with my fiber portions of my diet. What is my digestibility? What is my PNDFs, my NDFs, my rumen? The number that's coming up that I think is going to supplant a lot of these is the RU or the rumen NDF 240 or the RU undegradable NDF 240. I think there's some really good research that's being done right now that's going to allow us to take that next leap on maintaining proper rumen function. A basic formula that is key is that we must remember that nutrients entering the rumen can only disappear from the rumen by one of two ways. They either can be digested or they can be passed. And the basic formula is rumen degradation is equal to the rate of digestion divided by the rate of digestion plus the rate of passage. And so if I can keep things in the rumen, they're going to get digested. But the key is this one right here. I have to control that rate of passage. And so then it becomes a balance because I got to put new nutrients in that they can utilize, and I got to pass these other nutrients out. If I'm passing them too fast, I'm not getting to digestion. If I keep them in there too long, then I run out of substrate for my microbial protein. And so it's a simple little formula, but it really explains a lot of what we do try to do. So we're trying to focus on physical effective NDF. We used the Penn State four-box screen, and I think that four-box screen is really a key, because there we can start to get an idea of how much of those particles greater than 7.5 millimeters are reduced to the 4.04 millimeters. When we do our TMR audits in that sort of work, I want to know, am I changing the characteristics of that diet that's on paper versus what's being presented to the cow? So the PNDF then is the amount of NDF on the top three screens of the Penn State particle shaker. It's going to be greater than 4 millimeters. And so that allows me to have an understanding. Am I getting enough physical effective NDF? And I'm looking at that to try to control the rate of passage. As I say, I think this rumen undegradable NDF 240 is going to start to become the key. You know, as we're working with that, what the research has shown is when I get more than 0.3% of, or less than 0.3% of body weight, dry matter intake goes up. When dry matter intake goes up, rate of passage has gone up. When rate of passage has gone up, my rate of digestion has gone down. And so we got some good tools, and there's some good science that's coming. You know, keep your eye and keep listening on this rumen UNDF 240, or also rumen PE UNDF 240. I think those are going to be some key numbers for us down the road. So what about fat? Fat kind of gets a good name and a bad name. It's very, very important. It's a concentrated source of dietary energy. It does play a role in overall metabolism and metabolic health. And it represents a major determinant of my milk production, my milk fat, the amount and its composition, as we alluded to briefly, and reproductive efficiency. So fat is a very, very good nutrient, and we need it in our diets. The trouble is, rumen microbes don't like unsaturated fats. It can have a direct suppression on milk fat if they escape rumen degradation. That goes back to the biohydrogenation process that's been talked about for the last 10 or 15 years. If I get that stuff escaping the rumen, I can have a direct effect on milk fat suppression. This work was done by Bromgard. You know, he was doing duodenal diffusions of different, trans 10 cis 12 fatty acids. And you can see within a day, I cratered the herd's butterfat. And so I can control that. As long as it stays in the rumen, I'm cool. But if it starts flowing out of the rumen, bad things are going to happen. And it's not an acidosis or anything along those lines. It's a direct physical suppression of the ability of that mammary gland to manufacture that fat. The other thing that is kind of sneaky on us, and we've all seen that, we're working through a pile of corn sides and all of a sudden butterfat takes a roll down. We know that we have more than enough unsaturated fatty acids for milk fat depression to occur if we get altered rumen function or increased turnover. What we're finding as we started to look at the different fat levels in things like corn silage or corn, there is a tremendous range in these C18-2s, from 0.64 up to 1.53. Average is 1.0, but if I all of a sudden jump to 1.53 and I'm feeding a high corn silage diet, I'm going to suppress my butterfat if it's passing through. And so looking a little bit deeper is one of the things we've learned over the last 5 to 7 years is that, pay attention to the fatty acid profiles of your feed ingredients because they can have a big impact. Starch, this is work from Jenkins, who's kind enough to share the slide with us. We know that rumen pH, is a determinant of microbial populations in rumen. When we get to lower rumen pH is one factor that can lead to these altered rumen function and changing the biohydrogenation pathways. The first lever that we always tend to like to pull is cows are not performing well, let's increase the starch in the diet. We increase the starch in the diet, as we can see here, we have a negative effect once I get over a tipping point on my butterfat. And so again, it's called balancing for a reason. We got to have a balance, Not all good, not all good. There's somewhere in the range there, but we have to pay attention to it. And finally, let's talk just a little bit about additives. I stole these 4 points from Dr. Mike Hutchins, probably about 25 years ago, he was giving a talk on additives. And he said there's 4 things that we need to be considering when we look at additives. Number 1 is anticipated response. Number 2 is the economic return. Number 3 is what is the available research that's there. And number 4, what is the field responses? And I use that over and over again, keeping those 4 things, because every one of them is very, very important. And we had a situation here just recently where we didn't understand why we weren't performing with our protected methionine. And so we decided to switch ingredients. This is where we switched. It took 3 days. So not only was I feeding a protected methionine with a marginal economic return, I wasn't even getting the response. And so I was getting a double whammy. The beauty of the protected methionine is I can put them in, I can pull them out, and I'm going to see a response in 2 weeks. It's going to happen that fast. You know, things like that. Don't ignore field responses. Some things feed different on some dairies. Other additives that we consider, you know, when the price is right, is there DCAD levels? You know, good research out there on DCAD levels, getting them, particularly in the summertime, above 30, which can be really tough this year in Wisconsin, where we had so much winter kill and we're down to 2.5 pounds of dry matter on haylage. But there are products that we can use to try to get that DCAD over 30 milliequivalents per 100 grams. Again, the fat supplementation, tons and tons of research out there, you know, different types of fat supplementation. But as a general rule, as long as I can keep that in and it truly is protected, I can drive milk fat. You know, you look, this is the saturated fatty acids, the C16s and below. This is the triglycerides, and this is the calcium salts. Every single one of them gave us a response. You know, it just depends on what's going to work into your diet and what is the most economical. Finally, the fermentation products. There's been a lot of work done on fermentation products and shown some very, very positive signs on fat-corrected milk, energy-corrected milk, you know, up to 0.13 on fat, you know, and 0.07 on protein. And so fermentation products also have a place. You know, do they fit into your ration? And then some of the protected methionines not only give us an advantage on our protein levels, but also can give us advantage on our butter fat. And so again, you know, are you using a blend? Do you mix it in? What lever are you trying to pull to get to where you need to be? In summary, you know, understand what is possible. You know, look at your pounds of components, look at your component efficiency. It's another number that we got to be looking at. Look at your energy corrected feed efficiency. Can't use one number. Look at all 3. You know, look at all 3. Finally, know your options. What levers do you have to pull? But most importantly, understand the economics. When does it make sense? You know, do the math. Have your consultants, you know, your professional people help you on out. Because there's a lot of good products out there that can help you on out depending on your situation.